From the center of the universe, Toronto, Ontario, Canada, this is the SDM Show with your host, Rob Cairns. The SDM Show focuses on business, life, productivity, digital marketing, WordPress, and more. Sit back, relax, grab your favorite drink, and enjoy the show. Here is Rob.
Hi, all. Rob Cairns here. I'm the founder, CEO, and chief creator of Amazing Ideas and Stunning Digital Marketing. In today's edition of the SDM Show, I sit down and talk with my friend Kathy Zant about WordPress marketing and more. Sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. Hey everybody, Rob Cairns here. I'm here with my good friend Kathy Zant, and we're going to talk a little bit about what I call WordPress potpourri. How are you today, Kathy?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on, Rob.
Always a pleasure. We've been talking about doing this for a while, and it's about time. What is your background, and how did you come to WordPress? I have to ask that question.
Sure, no problem. Well, I started with the internet way before WordPress even existed. So I was working at a company as a marketing person. I think my job title was like marketing coordinator. And one of my jobs, this is sort of like almost pre-internet, one of my jobs was to get these mailings ready. And I had to get like data out of the database in order to like get customer merges and all of this stuff for actual mailings in the mail. And trying to get the tech guys to actually do anything was really hard because they had a lot on their plates. So I taught myself how to get into the database. And then the internet came along and I taught myself how to do a bunch of that stuff. And there was an internet guy nobody wanted to talk to. So I taught myself HTML so I could get things done without having to talk to the guy that everybody was scared of, right? So, it just kind of like the internet started in my life as kind of like something I needed to learn in order to get my job done. And then I was like, oh, this is going to be so cool. And then I saw what Amazon was just starting to do with like selling books. And I'm like, this is going to change everything. So I threw myself into learning how to publish online. And so it was like, basic HTML, CSS hadn't even started. JavaScript, I like taught myself JavaScript just so I could do mouse overs, because there was nothing back then. It was like, I remember the day that internet, what was it? Firefox 4, it wasn't even, it was like Mozilla or whatever. That came out and there were layers and all this weird stuff that I had to learn. And I'm like, this is fascinating. This is always going to keep my mind engaged. I'm going to do this. I'm going to become an internet developer. Took courses on programming way back in the day. When CSS came, I learned that. When JavaScript got more and more powerful, I learned that. I learned SQL. I learned how to manage servers. I had inherited a server that got hacked. So I learned all the security stuff. And so then when WordPress came along and I was using movable type for blogging, and WordPress came along and it was using the same class in PHP to address the database that I was using in my PHP MySQL projects. So I was like, oh, this is makes so much more sense to keep everything in a database rather than like movable type, which was just like outputting HTML files. So I moved over to WordPress, tore apart core, put it back together the way I wanted it. I would never do that now, of course, but back then it was a much more simple project. And so I was kind of playing along with the code and not contributing or anything because I had my own projects and everything I was doing as a developer. But I just kind of like grew up with the internet and kind of grew up with WordPress. And then, after a while, after having a couple of kids around and getting really busy, I'm like, I'm tired of I have all this work I have to do for friends and family and clients and everything. So I started using WordPress and migrated everybody over to WordPress. And when WooCommerce got bought, then it was, nobody's going to use my crappy little shopping cart that I built. Everybody's going to WooCommerce because somebody else is going to maintain this code, not me. And so I really kind of jumped into probably like everything went over to WordPress. All of my projects were migrated over probably by 2014 or so. 2015 when Automatic bought WooCommerce, then I was like, okay, this is going to be something. And so that's kind of my WordPress origin story. I didn't get involved with the community until I moved to Phoenix in 2018, and then really got involved with community, and that was loads of fun.
Yeah. It's funny you say you started before the internet because I was kind of nodding my head at that comment. I can recall having a 300 baud modem
Yeah.
in an Apple II Plus, which I still have, that belonged to my father. And I used to do dial in late at night so I didn't impact the family phone line at the time. And and I also went to a college in Canada that had BitNet access. And we all, if you, those who don't know, BitNet was kind of the educational network that came out of the US military that a lot of the universities and colleges were on. And
Oh, wow.
we actually had full BitNet access at our college for students until some stupid student decided to send a bomb threat to Tel Aviv.
Oh, geez.
And fortunately, I was working for the college part time, so I also had a staff account. So
Yeah.
my BitNet access didn't disappear, and I started long, but like you, long before the internet. I think we're both showing our age a little bit when we talk about that, but that's
It was what a gift that was, though, because
yeah.
I mean, if somebody threw me into having to learn everything all at once now, I could see how it'd be like super overwhelming. And so, we got to learn little by little as new technologies came along, we got to
Mhm.
learn something new every time. And so I think it was like a huge gift to, at that time, recognize, hey, this is going to be something huge, and to stick with it.
Yeah, no, I would agree with you. And you being a bit of a marketing background, I'll share with you a story. I went to community college in 86, 87, 88, and I had a marketing instructor who walked in day one, threw her books on her desk, sat up on her chair, um, and she looked at the class and said, I'm only here because I want my summers off, and I teach from the textbook, and here's your exam dates. And I looked at her and I said, "So if you change those dates, you'll email out the dates?" She said, "Yes." I said, "Good. Goodbye. I'll see you on the first test date." And I swore then I would never end up in marketing. And what do
Yeah.
I do now? I'm in
Yeah.
marketing, and
Yeah.
it wasn't marketing. It was the experience. It was her, and needless to say, she didn't last very long at the college. And long and short of it is, after I've done full circle, and my background is very, I don't know if you know, it's very technical. It's programming, and it
Mhm.
was 20 years in tech support. And here I am in the web world and the marketing world, and I've gone full circle as well. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
sometimes things just kind of work its way through, Kathy.
Yeah, they totally do. And it's kind of funny because you can look back and just kind of see, the cycles that happen, and the patterns become very apparent from this side of things. But like when you're soaking in it, it's hard to tell.
It's hard to tell. So let's jump into WordPress for a minute. You've done a multitude of things. We've seen a lot of fury in the community lately, especially with the page builders and the blocks. And right now, I think there's a place for both.
Yeah.
But we have a different community. And I say this to many guests, and I say this to a lot of people I talk to. We have a very lucky community that everybody seems to know everybody and everybody tries to help everybody. What's your feelings on the community now that you're involved?
Yeah. Well, okay. So when I first moved to Phoenix, first of all, I was living in Mount Shasta, California, which is like paradise as far as I'm concerned. I still
Yeah.
miss it, but it was catching on fire every summer, and it was kind of like winters dull and rainy, and cooler, and snow, like 10 feet of snow, and things like that, which was fine. It was never like super cold like when I lived in Chicago. So winter wasn't that bad, but the summers were glorious, but it would catch on fire. It still
Mm.
catches on fire all the time. And so we made a decision to move because of the fires, because we just saw that they weren't going to get better. It was just going to keep happening. And it kind of, I'm raising my kids in this environment where they're like breathing smoke all summer long. And it was, I couldn't live with that. So we looked everywhere for the place to go, and we ended up in Phoenix. And Phoenix has like a very dynamic and vibrant WordPress community. I mean, there's a lot of hosting companies that are based there. There's a lot of tech that's based there. And so I moved there, and it's like blazingly hot. It was like 118 degrees one day. And I'm like, okay, bloom where you're planted, bloom where you're planted. What can I do to make the best of this situation? And I saw that there was like this WordPress meetup not too far from my house, where I was living kind of on the outskirts of Phoenix. So I went, and they were such a welcoming group of people. And that was my entree into the community, was being welcomed by this meetup on the outskirts of Phoenix. And then I decided, okay, well, let's look at WordCamp Phoenix. What's going on here? Let's meet some people. Let's just see what's going on. That group of people, led by, there's like a core team of people there that are just amazing people who so supportive, I mean, especially with like these online meetups now. If you have a chance to go to an online meetup that happens in Arizona, those people are so helpful, will just basically help anyone. Incredibly inclusive, just a great community. So I started helping with WordCamp Phoenix, and I did that for the couple of years that I was there. And then I was like, okay, well, I'm going to start pitching talks and share my knowledge, and let's give back like all these years of dealing with all kinds of things. And then, it kind of served, my job purpose as well. So I started just traveling and going to as many WordCamps as I could go to, and just started meeting people. And the greatest gift to me was to be able to sit next to someone, during opening remarks at a WordCamp and ask them how they use WordPress. And then meeting up with someone who is like just getting started, and they've got the list of all of things that they're going to go see. And like this one woman, she's like just getting started with her blog, and she's like, I think I'm going to go to this thing called Bash. And I'm like, oh honey, don't. Like, you don't want to go to Bash. What are you trying to do? And asking questions about like what she's trying to do with her blog and who her audience is, and then helping her decide like what sessions are going to really help her become successful, and giving her like advice on, even like the setting up a mailing list and making sure that you're, engaging with people and using WordPress to its fullest. And it was so empowering to me I like to see people's eyes light up when they discover what WordPress can do for them. And I miss being able to go to WordCamps and sit next to those new users and watch their eyes light up of like, oh, wow, I can do this. The technology has become so good. You don't have to like know how to FTP. You don't have to know how to code. You can just like share your voice with the world. You can share your interests, your hobbies. And I think our world right now kind of needs that. So that's one of the things I love about WordPress and love about the community. It empowers people.
I do too. It's funny because the last WordCamp we had in Toronto before the pandemic, and we have a pretty vibrant community up here with meetups and things like that.
Yeah.
I think in 2 days I saw one session, Kathy. I spent the whole time catching up with people, helping people, talking to people out of sessions. I think I saw one session in 2 days. And that session was put on by a good friend of mine. And I don't know if I had seen that one. And that's the one thing I miss about all the WordCamps, frankly, is being able to sit down with people face to face. It's been a hard couple of years for many of us. So,
Yeah, totally. And it's like, I'm still staying in touch with, I contributed and helped with WordCamp US, and I, have done a couple of other events over the past few months. So I'm like staying in touch with people, but I miss those like serendipitous meetings of someone that you can't plan to like have a conversation with, someone that you just end up sitting next to, and the conversation just kind of evolves and you learn something new, or you can share something that helps someone. And those sort of unplanned miracles, you can't make that happen when you're sitting home and just like on Slack or whatever with someone,
I would agree. I think the closest thing we have to that right now honestly is probably Twitter. And I say that, and those who don't know, I'm so not in that Facebook ecosystem anymore. Even though I have an account, I'm not
Mm.
for a number of reasons, and I don't like what's going on up there. They're in mess, and the fact that I can't post off my own business domain on Facebook, and this has been going on for 8 months. And
Oh,
as you
geez.
know, recently I shut down my Instagram account. Your comment was, "Oh, you can stalk me on Twitter." Well, you can stalk me anywhere. I'm not hard to find. So, you know, I just, but I think Twitter's probably the closest thing to that we have right now. Honestly,
Yeah, yeah, that's true. I mean, there's some good Facebook groups for WordPress
yep,
that I kind of poke my head in every once in a while. But yeah, I'm kind of the same mindset where it's just um, as all of this crazy stuff has hit, and then like the election cycles, and everybody's just like at a fevered pitch emotionally, and the algorithms like to play that up, and I don't want to participate in it. Like when I catch wind that something like scary or weird is happening in the world, and I start getting scared, or I start like, how's this gonna, and you kind of go into this future fear-based thinking pattern. I immediately shut it all down and I go outside, because guess
yeah,
what? The sky is still there. The sun is still shining. The trees, they don't care. The birds don't care. There's like the majority of life on Earth doesn't care about all of these incendiary types of things, or all of these heated discussions. And it's my job, it's each of our jobs, to maintain our emotional equilibrium in the midst
yeah.
of the storm, So
No,
that's
I agree. One of the things I do every day, and I'm looking out the window as we're recording, and it's sunny in Toronto. It's cool. I mean,
yeah,
but it's nice out, and I try to go for an hour walk every day. And the reason I
yeah,
originally started that, and this is going back about 6 or 7 years, was for a mental health break. Well, it has other benefits, but mental health was a big part of that. And we just
yeah,
got to take that and unplug when things get bad and just say, there's nothing I can do about this right now.
right,
It'll wait till tomorrow. You know,
right,
and that,
right, exactly.
and that's
Because
hard.
there's nothing we can do about like all of these big scary things. There's really nothing we can do about it. I mean, we can just kind of like, take care of ourselves and be safe and navigate it the best that we possibly
Hmm.
can, but we can't change it. We can't change, the greater geopolitical situations. We can't change, you know global health issues. There's nothing we can really do about it. We have to like kind of get really local, and in a lot of cases get like so local that it's just about you and your family, right? And take
That's
care of that, and that's it. And not really. And then there's also like a lot of, like I do the walk thing I have a dog, so he makes me,
yeah.
a couple times a day I have to. But it just being out in nature and connecting, and to really focus on being present, because that's all there really is. The future is going to take care of it, whatever is going to happen, right?
Yep. It's
But present moment.
so true. So one of the things you and I have been talking about on Twitter, on Facebook, on wherever we have a conversation, it seems to move around, is this whole move to blocks. And we
Yeah.
were talking in the pre-show that you made a decision to move your personal site to Cadence and Cadence Blocks, correct?
Yes, I did.
And those who know this podcast to know me, I'm in the middle of moving my agency site to Cadence and Cadence Blocks, and my personal site is half on Cadence Blocks, and I was playing with that last night. Why did you choose Cadence and Cadence Blocks over everything else out there?
Well, okay, so in my navigations around the WordPress space, I kept seeing Cadence, and it kept just like popping.
Hmm.
And then I had a conversation with someone, and they were like kind of gushing about it. And I'm like, all right, I'm going to look at this. And I have like tons of, so I set up a test site and just started playing with it. And then I was like, wow, this is really, really kind of powerful. And, I don't, I do marketing, but I'm not like, I have to do this for my personal brand. I don't think of myself in that way. It's just kind of like, where can I be of service, right? But,
Yep.
it's important for us to like understand that, we do have whether you think you do or you think you don't, you have a personal brand, you have a reputation, and people think of you and they stereotype you and they put you in boxes, and they want to know, and like somebody new comes along, they want to know who you are and where you come from in the most succinct way possible. So like understanding your personal brand is important. I'm not good at that. I can look at somebody else and say, okay, this is how I would do this, and people know you for this, and let's highlight that. And I can do it for other people, but for myself, oh my God, I'm terrible. But I started playing with Kadence, put it on my site, started playing with the block, and literally my site's not that huge, but it's old. I mean, I've kept the same personal site since I think it's 2011, 2012. So it's like 10 years old. That site, I've kept it there. I haven't like killed it and restarted or anything. So there's like lots of stupid things I'm embarrassed about, but it's all still there. And so there's a history there. So to retheme it is kind of a big deal because there's a lot of legacy stuff. I started playing with Kadence, and very quickly I set up a staging server, started doing it there, and I'm like, oh gosh, I can just do this on live. I mean, it's just my site, right? It happened so quickly. One Sunday morning, granted, my family was like preoccupied and leaving me alone. I didn't have any distractions. But one Sunday morning, it was that easy. And the greatest thing, even beyond how easy it was, is I chose specific templates as a part of Kadence that were in the starter blocks,
Mm-hmm.
I chose those things, and it forced me to rethink about how I present myself to the world. That was really the power and the reason why I was so excited about it is because I had to make some decisions about who I am and how do I present myself to the world. I had to think of myself the same way I would think about like somebody else's brand. And it made me look better. I'm like, I didn't do this. Kadence forced me to think of myself differently.
Yeah.
And it was fast to get it switched over. It was powerful in how it changed the way I thought about things. And I'm still tweaking it and still playing with it. And then once I was done and I had everything situated, then I went into like the Kadence customizer and like did the performance enhancements. And then I ran speed tests because I'm like kind of a dork about speed.
I know.
And it was so yeah. It was so fast. And the reason why I was on Astro to begin with was because it was a fast, lightweight theme. And Kadence is that, but it gives me so much more in terms of easy ways to define a brand, to define my brand.
Yeah.
Things I couldn't think through on my own because I'm like, how you're like self-conscious about things. I couldn't do it for myself. If I had handed it over to someone else, they would have redesigned my site and made it like perfect. But I wanted to go through the exercise of doing it myself. And Kadence changed everything for me. So I was like, it was almost like a spiritual kind of experience of like looking back on it and going, what just happened there? I mean, sure, it was like some focused time, but I have a site that I'm actually like kind of proud of. I'm like happy with how it came out.
Mm-hmm.
Still need to, I'm still working on it, still tweaking it. It's never going to be 100% done. But I'm still just impressed with what Kadence was able to do for me and changing the way I thought about how I present myself to the world. It was really cool.
I would agree. What kind of pushed me in that group was I sat down and watched not a webinar, one of the lunch and learn sessions with Spencer Foreman one day, who's a player with Launchify. And Spencer's all in with Kadence as well. Yeah. He's been all in with blocks. And I said, and then Spencer sort of said, and by the way, if you want to do some editing, you should look at a product called Editor Plus by Extendify.
Uh-huh.
And I've also got Editor Plus installed. Editor Plus gives you some editing control in the paragraphs and stuff. And the minute he gave me that push, I decided to make my move. And cool. that's why I went. And those who know me know for the last year and a half, I've been on the blog fence. I've got I've got a Beaver Builder license. I've got an Elementor license. I've got my own agency site is built on Aveda, which has its own page builder. And I basically said, I'm going to get this done by middle of November, come hang or high water, basically.
Yeah.
And it's just been a lot of work. Now, fortunately, on the personal side, I wasn't running a personal site at the time. The only reason why I am now is because I'm not using Facebook, so I need a place to put stuff. So
Yeah.
my family kind of hates me right now because they're all like, do we have to go somewhere else? Why won't you post this? I said, nope, I'm not doing it. If you want to stay in touch, this is your problem, not my problem. So
Yeah.
go leave me be. And the on the agency side, and we were talking in a pre-show, I used it as an opportunity to do a content audit. And I had done one 2.5 years ago. And I still pulled another 55 blog posts out of the move. And I'm doing all the work like you on a live site. I'm moving everything to blocks. Then when I get everything moved to blocks, I'll dump it on a staging site, flip the theme, and do the final back end stuff. And I don't know if it's the right way or the wrong way to do it, but with 150 blog posts and a blog that keeps adding 2 podcasts a week, for me, it's the
Yeah.
easy way. So
Yeah. Yeah. That's the best way to do it. I mean, I'm a huge just knowing how complicated sites can be. I
yep.
mean, if it's mission critical, it's doing a staging site is just the way to do it. So I just live
If I
dangerously.
if I was running a membership backend or a CRM within WordPress, there's no
Sure.
way I would be doing it this way, but I'm not doing either. And the other interesting thing, and you may or may not know I did at the same time, is I moved my podcast hosting to Castos in the
Yeah,
middle
I
of all
did see
this,
that.
and I moved my email marketing to ConvertKit all at once.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
Yeah, I want to ask you about Castos because I
sure.
use simple. I mean, I don't really podcast that much anymore personally. I was for a while, and I've kept it up there because I'm like, someday. But I use seriously simple podcasting. I use the plugin and I've used it for years. And now I'm getting all the promos for Castos. And I'm curious what benefits you're getting from it.
For me, Castos was actually a really easy move. So I had run my podcast on Anchor for a long time because
Uh-huh.
Anchor was free hosting. And one of the things I wanted to do was get my podcast on Amazon Music. And
Mm.
to get it on Amazon Music, Anchor doesn't support that. And I had to move to Castos. And the other reason is I really like the analytics coming out of Castos.
Okay.
I'm an interesting podcaster, and I'm seeing this more and more. People are picking and choosing episodes and not subscribing. So my number one source of people listen to my podcast is Google Chrome,
Hmm.
not a
Interesting.
podcast catcher, which is really interesting.
Yeah.
So the analytics for Castos are really easy. The support for me is a big deal for stuff like this, coming from a support background, and the Castos team has been great. So what happened was I'm friends like you are with Bob Dunn. I'm friends with Matt Medeiros. I'm friends with Joe Casabono. 3 guys who are all on Castos, but
Mhm.
that's not where it came from. And I reached out to Matt one day on Twitter, knowing he was working for Castos. Matt, besides his podcast, works for Castos full time. And Matt said, the Castos team does an Ask Them Anything call every noon on Tuesdays. Here's the link. You might get something out of it, and if you still have problems, come back to me. So I jumped on a noon on Tuesday call, and I had 3 Castos team members to my absolute lonesome for an hour. And there was nobody else that joined the call that day. So I got all my questions in, I got all my answers in, and within an hour after I had made the move.
Wow.
The biggest thing people have to remember is when they switch podcast hosts, they have to redirect their RSS feed and leave the old host in place for a couple of weeks to let that populate to all the
Sure.
other.
Sure.
But honestly, the move was a piece of cake, and I don't regret it. From a visibility standpoint, I prefer the Castos player, especially the player if you show all the episodes, which I do on a podcast page and on the main page of my website. I prefer the individual player to the anchor player.
Mm.
Um, with Castos, you can manage your podcast two ways, either in WordPress through a plugin or from the website. And I'm sure there's some people that are going to snarl at me for this, but I tend to manage mine through the website, not the player. I just find it so easy, and
Yeah.
I don't even think about it. And I've had a couple questions along the way, and I've been very public about this. A shout out to the Castos team and Craig over there, because that team has been absolutely amazing in the conversion. So
Oh, that's great.
I haven't even looked back. And the same thing with ConvertKit. The reason
I
I
love
moved
ConvertKit. They're
the
awesome.
reason I moved to ConvertKit, I have a lifetime mail poet license that will host a. I think my license is like 12,000 people with what I bought.
Hmm.
And the reality is, MailPoet, and now owned by Automatic and WooCommerce, hasn't built in the automation that I've been looking for, and I'm trying to do some more automation stuff. So I
Yeah.
decided ConvertKit was the place to go, and the marriage between ConvertKit and Castos has worked really well. So I'm really
Oh,
happy,
great.
actually.
Great.
Yeah,
That's awesome. Yeah, I love ConvertKit. It's so easy. I, was using MailChimp for many clients, and I think my husband's business is still on it. I hate it now. It's like they've made everything so complicated. I just
I
want like simple send.
I think if you're gonna go to Mailchimp, the or one of those Mailchimp, I've used. I'm actually Infusionsoft certified, and I have been, and I find Infusionsoft just overkill for 99% of the people out there.
Sure.
I've used Active Campaign extensively, and to be honest, the interface in Active Campaign is so 20 years ago it drives me up the wall.
Mm.
I think the only way to make MailChimp or Active Campaign work in a WordPress environment is to go to something like Newsletter Glue in the WordPress backend and manage it that way. I
Sure.
I don't think doing it natively is worth it. And of course, MailChimp's been bought. They're now owned by Intuit in Canada.
Yeah.
And I still don't understand that marriage. I really don't.
You don't?
Intuit No, Intuit's a
Well,
financial services company. I don't get it.
well, if you think about QuickBooks,
Yep.
and QuickBooks runs um, so many small businesses, even
Yep.
some mid-sized businesses are using QuickBooks. So they do things like send out invoices, customer management, CRM types of things.
Yep.
And I think that that's where the marriage of Intuit and MailChimp happens, is because of customer CRM, the customer relationship management that happens, and being able to mail, and having that kind of seamless. It's almost kind of like how like HubSpot has the sales end of things, and then they have the marketing end of things, and those
Yep.
things kind of
It's
like are,
almost the same. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So I kind of feel like the Intuit play was sort of almost becoming a HubSpot-ish type of play, because you can do so much sales and marketing when you've got that customer information all in one place,
That,
and being able to personalize a message to, once somebody's invited you into their inbox, it's time to get personal. It's not the same as just like putting out a Twitter post. This is a conversation where your customer, how they're using your products, what their challenges are, what their interrelation with your business is, and you personalize the mailings that you send to them based on what you know about them. So
mhm.
I think it makes sense.
Yeah, I can see that point of view. QuickBooks has Intuit's really changed their model in the last while. The numbers when they made that buyout were just extraordinary. Like I
Yeah,
saw what they paid in the billions, and I almost fell off my chair. And
yeah,
it was like, here we go again. And I think that's just a markup for what we're seeing in the marketing and the WordPress spaces. The market is
sure.
more maturing, and we're seeing all these mergers running around. I mean, we've got the Liquid Web Stellar WPs of the world. We've got now GoDaddy jumping into payment processing. I think
Yeah.
theirs is based on sitting on top of Stripe, if I recall. Um, we've got WooCommerce, who's got their own payment processing sitting on
Mm-hmm.
top of Stripe. We've got Square running around being a big player because they're owned by Jack Dorsey, who's a multi-billionaire who founded Twitter. I mean, there's just
Mm-hmm.
so much going on right now in that space that it's just like, it's crazy right now.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting because a lot of, I mean, I know a lot of people who are in the WordPress space, plugin developers, and people get an idea. They develop a plugin, and then all of a sudden it becomes like huge, right? It solves
Hmm.
a problem. It solves a real world problem, and people get really lucky creating this, and then all of a sudden it's like, oh my gosh, it's turned into a business. What do I do now? Right? It's like you've got a couple of people who are like building a plugin and it becomes successful, and then there's all these other things that have to happen with taking care of customers, legal, um, you know running a business has so many different moving parts, and in order to remain successful, it's almost like they need to scale up. And if your job is writing code and writing even extraordinary code, to take someone out of that skill set and say, okay, now you're going to have to think about legal and accounting and benefits for employees and everything, it's like fish out of water. It's tough. So I understand how all of the
Yeah.
mergers and acquisitions are happening. It's hard to scale up a business, and if you've made something successful that's serving a community, um, you serve that community best by partnering with people who can
Hmm.
handle all of that stuff.
Yeah, and it's not, to me, a surprise that a lot of them are happening with hosting companies. Like,
Yeah.
there's some people upset about that in the community, but my response would be it gives the hosting companies another offering so they can do a package, and that is
Right.
and you and I both know hosting in this business is so key. Like, I hate to go there, but we all know what the EIG / new folds of the world are like, and I know they're a WordPress partner, but I just wouldn't go there if my life depended on it personally.
There's so many good people there. So
I
I
I know I know there's great people there, but from a trying to run a site that scales, it's really
Sure.
hard.
Sure. Well, yeah, I mean, I had a hard time deciding where to finally put my. I moved to spin up WP and
Yep.
DigitalOcean and run it, everything that way, because it's just. I mean, I've got the technical chops to do it. I helped a friend of mine do it who doesn't have the technical chops to do that. I'm like, but he was having speed issues, and I'm like, this has worked out really well for me. And now he's there, and he's like, how do I update?
I know.
You SSH and you have the key. Like I just can't. So I help out a lot. But yeah, it's the hosting space is really interesting. I mean, obviously, coming from more on the plugin side of things, a plugin company is very dependent upon their customer's relationship with a hosting provider, because the
Yep.
hosting provider owns that customer relationship much more than a plugin or a theme company ever will. So you want to ensure that your customers have a host that works with your product and everything.
Mhm.
But the host owns that relationship. Think about, okay, if you have any kind of plugin, let's pick something that I'm like totally not involved in. Let's say you have a plugin that does we'll take WP Optimize. I love that
Yep.
plugin. I love
So do I.
it. Yeah. So WP Optimize. You have it installed on your site, but something's going wrong and it's not working. And there's something with your hosting environment that's causing it. Not that I've ever experienced that. There aren't problems with WP Optimize in any hosts. But let's say hypothetically that that's the case. That person experiencing that problem is much more likely to go find another optimization plugin rather than change hosts.
Yeah.
So if you have like plugin crashes into host, the host is always going to win. So for plugin companies or theme companies, it almost makes sense for them to partner with. I just kind of sense that that's what's going to end up happening. The problem with, I think, with a lot of hosting providers are doing, and I've got friends and family who host in all kinds of different places, and I'll log in and I'm like, well, why did you install this? And they don't know why something is there. So like the environment looks like completely different in a SiteGround installation than it does in a Bluehost installation.
Yeah.
And so people then they move a host or something, and now my WP admin looks different. And it's like they don't understand what pure WordPress looks like. They only understand what their hosting provider's implementation of WordPress looks like. And I
Yeah.
think that's a problem.
And then you get guys like me who like to run white label CMS by WP Engine, and that totally changes the admin big time. So,
Yeah.
and one of the reasons I've run that plugin for years is, that client that asks for admin access that is dangerous. Well, with white label CMS, you can lock admins out of specific parts too. so, so
Nice.
I've had to use it on occasion. It's either that or the client ends up paying for high recovery bills, which they don't want to pay, right? So it's like,
Sure. Well,
but yeah, we have to protect them from themselves. Sometimes they don't
exactly.
know what they're asking for. Um, yeah, so it's. I think with hosting is what it comes down to is there's different things for different people. Somebody who's got
Sure.
a 3-page brochure site versus somebody who's trying to run an agency versus I have a client who's got 3,000 items in a Woo store, and they're all different levels, right?
Yeah.
So the 3,000 items in the Woo store, I can tell you, is running on a dedicated box on DigitalOcean
Mm.
for exactly that reason, because then you have control over it. So you got to really kind of look at what you need, why you need it, and how you need it, and kind of go from there. And then also say, okay, do I want it managed? Do I don't want it managed? Do I want to pay for a care plan? Somebody else? Do I not want to pay for a care plan?
Yeah.
How am I going to run my backups? Do my backups actually work? You've been in that side of things, so you know where I'm coming from there. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
many people never test a backup till they actually need it, which is the worst mistake they can possibly make.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh my gosh. Oh, I've got my backups. Yeah. But if you don't have a tested backup, you don't have backups.
That's right.
So true. So true.
And years of working in tech support, we used to do on our Exchange servers when I was in healthcare. We used to do recoveries every 2 months to a dummy server to make sure we could recover Exchange backups
Yeah.
every two.
Smart.
And many banks do that. They have data recovery days where they actually test for regulatory reasons to make sure that their backups are in place. And it's something honestly that small business owners don't think about. And I think what small business owners need to look at it and say, okay, how much is my website costing me?
Yeah.
And what does it mean to my business? So I had a client recently, and I'm not going to name the client because the whole thing went south, but he decided he was going to move his website and not tell his hosting guy, me. And he had a WooCommerce store, and whoever moved the site for him made a mess of it. And the site story short was this particular site was making $20,000 a day.
Wow.
And he was down by the time he got back up, he was down for 7 days.
Wow.
And it was partially because people didn't check backups they made. They didn't check
Yeah.
restores. They didn't. There's so much integral factors, and I think what people need to do, And it's not just about the website, it's also about the legal, the accounting, the HR, anything in this business is if you're not good at it, consider it a cost of doing business and think about if you can do it, outsourcing that function of your business and paying somebody who's good at it so you
Yeah.
can concentrate on what makes you money.
Right. Right.
And
Exactly. It's just an optimization strategy. I mean, once you start, any small business that wants to grow needs to offload things that they're not good at and focus on what they are good at so that they can grow. If you're trying to do everything yourself as a small business, it just like tying anvils around your ankles when you're trying to swim. Let
yeah,
yourself be free.
it's so hard. It's like I always say to people, I can do my own books. I don't like doing my books, so I get
Yeah.
somebody to do my books. It's that simple, right? It becomes crazy. So
Yeah.
let's move on for a sec. So you've gone. We were talking about the whole cadence blocks thing. Um, do you see the page builders disappearing anytime soon, or do you think there's going to be an integration or a merger or between page builders and blocks, or do you have any sense of where that's going to go?
Um I'm a big fan of blocks. I'm a big fan of Gutenberg. I'm a fan of running WordPress as light as possible.
Yep.
Um, Not only for security and performance reasons, but simplicity reason. But because with any site, that the more you try to do with your site, the more you have to untangle when things don't work or when you decide something else is going to work better. If you commit to um, if you commit to a plugin, if you commit to a page builder, if you commit to anything that is going to be a part of your site, it's there. Everything kind of gets interwoven, and if things are going to change in 5 years, you're going to have to untangle that if you don't want it anymore. So I like to run as light as possible and keep things as simple as possible because I'm thinking in terms of longevity, as well as speed, as well as performance, as well as security. It's just kind of my MO. I, I've used Gutenberg. I've used Divi. I have not used, oh, wait, no, I did use Beaver Builder for one thing. Um, so I've, had some exposure to all of them. Incredibly powerful. The first one I was exposed to was Divi, and it allowed my husband to do his own web pages, which was heaven to me because before it was just like, I need a landing page, and I was like, all right, here we go. And
Yeah.
I was doing everything. And this gave me some freedom because he was able to work with Divi and he really liked it. And so he started, creating landing pages on his own. And so it gave him, and what is WordPress about? It's about empowerment. So as long as people are finding empowerment with page builders, they will continue to exist. I find it incredibly interesting that page builders are doing sort of like these cloud things. Like Kadence has a cloud thing. Beaver
Yeah.
Builder just announced their cloud thing. Elementor has their own hosting. There's
Yeah.
all kinds of like really interesting things that the page builders are doing. But, they are dependent upon what WordPress does. If WordPress decides to go in a certain way that makes page builders not work, but I mean, that's all of us in WordPress. If WordPress decides to change the laws of WordPress and we have built our houses in the state of WordPress, we are beholden to the laws of WordPress. I mean, we could always fork it and do whatever, but if you want to stay with, the community and where WordPress is going, you have to kind of be a visionary and understand, what is it that you're committing to. So that's my take on page builders, and I think they're here to stay. I mean, they're always going to be around. Um, but the blocks are so powerful. I really enjoyed some of the interesting stuff at WordCamp US that were shown, like all the creative, innovative things that are happening with blocks and block patterns,
Mhm.
and how it's changing theming, and that's all really fascinating, innovative, cool stuff to me. And I think that that's going to improve how websites are built. So that's kind of like where I am. If I had to put my chips on the table somewhere, that's where I'm putting mine. So
Yeah. There's the really cool thing with block patterns is you can actually take a block pattern from somewhere, from a repository, and
Yeah.
basically import it into your site. So I'm playing around right now with some pricing pages, and I have to admit I've cheated. I've gone and found some block patterns that are already created to
That's so
build out
cool.
those pricing pages. And there's some really cool resources, including the WordPress repository and some other places.
Yeah.
And I think like anybody who wants to learn more about blocks and Gutenberg, I think a really good spot to go is go meet Birgit over at Gutenberg Times and look at some of the stuff they're doing and talking about on a weekly basis, because there's a lot of amazing stuff. And I'm with you. I think to keep WordPress lightweight, you've got to run natively, and I think blocks are a better way to run natively than to run a page builder at this point. And one of the reasons I'm moving away from a page builder, to be frank.
Yeah.
And I think blocks, truthfully, if you have the right combination, are mature enough to build client sites on. There's a lot of people who
Yes.
don't think that. I was looking at the time of this recording and a tweet from Wesley Sims over at Newsletter Glue saying, that she's using a page builder because she doesn't think blocks are there. And I'm like, okay, like it is a learning curve. There's no
It
question.
is. Yeah.
But I
But
think with the right
yeah.
combo, it's an easy learning curve.
Right. I mean, if you asked me 2 years ago, if,
Yep.
or even three, even like last year, I wasn't like fully 100% can I do this with blocks. I was trying to, but I wasn't real happy with what I was doing. It didn't have, but I mean, I don't have a lot of time to let, I'm not a designer, I've done design, but I'm not a designer, and I have a higher standards, and I want to see other people's creative designs.
Hmm.
And that's one of the reasons why I loved Cadence, is because it gave me those designs where I could just like basically pull all the puzzle pieces together and say, okay, and this fits here. And ooh, look at
Yep.
that. I wonder how is that, and it gave me so much freedom and flexibility. It empowered me to be a designer. And so there's innovation happening with blocks. And I'm really interested to see what more is coming. That's where I'm feeling like the most energy, and I'm sensing the most innovation happening right now. And like the page builders, I mean, I haven't looked at Divity in a few years. I haven't looked at Elementor in at least a year. So I'm not like hip to what innovation they're doing. But right now, I'm most excited about what's happening with, the Gutenberg block space. So
Yeah, I would agree, and I would also agree that for somebody new coming into WordPress, going to blocks is a natural fit.
it is exactly.
I mean, I would think, it was funny when page builders came out 4 years ago or whenever it was, everybody said, oh, a page builder, yuck. And everybody's using them. And now a lot of the
Yeah.
world is saying Gutenberg, yuck. Well, you know what's going to happen in 3 years, right?
Yeah.
It's that
Yeah.
natural progression. And the
Right.
biggest problem is, and the reason we're not seeing a big shift right now is if you're using a page builder, you've got all kinds of shortcodes. And having just
Right.
going through that process right now, it's almost a total site rebuild. And there's no easy way to move from a short code based page builder to a block system without rebuilding pages one at a time. That's,
Yeah. You know what? Hey, WordPress people listening to this, there's a product need right there.
yeah, a big one.
Somebody needs to
Help.
build a conversion plugin for from page builders to blocks.
Yeah.
That's the winner right now. I don't know how much of a winner it'll be in 10 years, but there'll be a plugin for it, I'm sure. That's how
Yeah.
WordPress works.
Yeah. Now I wanted to circle back to something at WordCamp US, which you were involved with.
Yeah.
Matt did not do a state of the world of the word this time. Is he planning on doing one down the world, or do you know what's going on with that?
I believe there's going to be a standalone one. That's what, don't quote me. Well, maybe you can quote me on it. I'm okay being told I was wrong. I'm pretty sure he's going to do a state of the word eventually, but something happened, and so I think it's going to happen on its own. So, but I believe it's coming.
Yeah, I thought so too. I just wanted to clarify because I know traditionally it's always been done at WordCamp
Yeah.
US. And the other traditional interesting thing in past is Toronto's WordCamp has always been held the weekend before WordCamp US. And with the pandemic, of course, we haven't held it. So there's always at the Toronto one, there's always speculation on what's going to happen at WordCamp US because it's right the
Yeah.
week before. It's quite interesting.
Yeah.
Um, I think we're going to be kind of in this virtual mode for another 6 months, whether we like it or not. Honestly, like I think
Yeah.
I don't see an end to this pandemic coming. I wish I did, but that's just the reality of it all. And I think we just need to keep doing some of these online meetups we talked about and keep working away on what we need to do to keep the community going and try to help each other. Like honestly, like give back to the community and try and jump in and help some people. And
Yeah.
I think that's important.
Yeah, there's a lot of things happening that have been really cool that have come out of all of this. Like there've been some meetups that have been very localized, that then become more like globally. You find a global audience, like Dan Maybe's London meetup has
Yeah.
found a global audience, right? Um, Dan Maybe's just like amazing.
Yes.
WordFest, he's so cool. I love Dan Maybe. When Open premiered at WordCamp US 2 years ago, the movie we made about the WordPress community,
Yeah.
and Matt Mullenweg showed it at State of the Word, I was like, this is like crazy. Hey Dan, I'm gonna sit next to you in case I have a breakdown. I'm gonna sit next to the guy
Yeah.
who's Mr. Mental Health. You can save me. It was so cool though to like share that moment and to sit there and watch that happen. But Dan's got WordFest. There's I'm going to help out with some of the communication efforts with WordFest because that's coming up again soon.
Yep.
There's tons of meetups around the world that are doing really good things. Phoenix, I know, has got really great meetups, and they're doing them online so people can jump on to meetup.com and find the Arizona ones because they do great work. So, but yeah, hopefully next year we'll open things up a little more and we can hang out again.
Yeah, it's long overdue. Thanks for the amazing chat today, Kathy. If somebody wants to get a hold of you, where is the best way?
My website, Zant.com. You can go see what I did with Kadence.
Yeah.
Tell me what you think. You can also find me. I'm more active, I think, on Twitter. Kathy Zant on Twitter. KTHYZANT. I'm Kathy Zant everywhere. Facebook, I don't really post on anymore. Just kind of go check and see what crazy people are doing. And Instagram, I post pictures of mostly like my kids' horse activities, if you're into that. But it's I don't know. I'm everywhere. LinkedIn, I'm on there too. But
Yeah, be sure to go stalk. Be sure to go stalk Kathy. Tell her I sent you. So,
it's great conversation, Rob. It's always good to talk to you.
yeah, thanks a lot, Kathy. Have a great day. Bye bye. A very special thank you to Kathy Zant for joining me on today's edition of the SDM Show. Thank you for listening to this edition of the SDM Show. The SDM Show is brought to you by Rob Cairns and Stunning Digital Marketing. For more information about Rob Cairns and Stunning Digital Marketing, go to stunningdigitalmarketing.info. From here, you can connect to us on social media, go to our website, and even go to the podcast to subscribe. This podcast is dedicated to my late father, Bruce Cairns. Dad, I miss you very much. Keep your feet on the ground, keep reaching for the stars, make your business succeed.